Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. And this watch is a historical document, one of the earliest examples of a strap-clad Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore. You're looking at reference 25770BA. It's a D67000 serial range, and you can see just from the model-specific number on the case back that this is a very rare offering and a very early example of its type. You saw the first Royal Oak Offshore at Basel in 1993, designed by young Emmanuel Guet. It was a more modern, aggressive form of the 1972 Gerald Genta Royal Oak. Genta reportedly hated it, but the revolutionary always becomes the establishment. In time, the Royal Oak Offshore has been a classic in its own right. Also worth mentioning, the strap version, the 25770, didn't join the 25721 on a bracelet until the year 1996. I believe this is approximately a 1997, and that's confirmed by both the serial number and the fact that if you turn off the light and let this one fade to black, it will do so with indecent haste. It is a tritium dial, and although not signed as such, there is absolutely no denying I spent 5 minutes turning lights on and off to confirm this. You can also see the haze of aging tritium on the blob-style indices and the baton-style hands, both redolent of the early offshore. You can see the watch is big, 42 millimeters in diameter. It's 54 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, 14.4 millimeters thick, and I weighed it. It's true that Royal Oak Offshores have been getting lighter, with or without bracelets. Compared to the historical versions, they always weigh less when I cross-reference. This, despite not having a bracelet, was 210 grams. We're approaching half a pound for a watch that doesn't even have a bracelet. Throwing it on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, you see another characteristic of these early offshores on straps. A relatively conventional lug junction. We don't have the double plot links that interchangeably interface with straps or bracelets on the modern offshores. The original offshores, whether on a bracelet or on a strap, received unique cases for each application. Taking a quick look, it's a big watch. That said, if you're going to wear this on a borderline wrist like mine, getting the early version on a strap actually helps quite a bit. Those little plot links add size and stiffness on the more modern strap-clad offshores, so this actually works just fine. If you like big and you like bold, and gold is bold, this watch is big enough for any taste, but it's also easy enough to fit on my wrist that I think a 16-centimeter circumference wrist can wear this well. We have a shark skin strap, and you can see that it does take a little bit of customization to get a strap to fit this case, but the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore strap aftermarket is huge, so you can go OEM or aftermarket. You'll have no trouble finding something to match this. Note the use of screws and bars to fix the strap to the case, and then when we get to the buckle, also screws and bars. Now, it's more expensive to do this than use spring bars, but it's the right way to do it, as it ensures a great degree of security against accidental discharge. Taking a look, you can see the buckle, Audemars Piguet branded with media blast and polish. This little button sockets in, and it's a snap shut. Taking a look externally, you can see that the buckle itself is approximately 1/2 of a Royal Oak bezel. Nicely done. The case is remarkably full. The lines are razor sharp. Everything is symmetrical from side to side and end to end. This case not only shows you why the artistry of the case finisher is a huge selling point on a Royal Oak or offshore, but it also communicates a watch that individually, and I'm talking about this one now, appears to have been never refinished or refinished sparingly and by very professional hands. All of the character lines are perfectly distinct from bezel into case back. The expanding bevels on the lugs and lug hoods, the micro beveling on the crown guard structure. This is an incredible preservation. The bezel gasket, an oversized, broadly, boldly expressed styling element of the offshore. It was only a hairline aspect of the original Royal Oak, but you can see here it is loud and proud, and it is the same dark blue as the nitrile covers of the crown and the chronograph pushers. Note that the crown, which is a screw down, features a hexagonal shoulder, and then we have that same form with the steel bolts in the bezel. Because it's an offshore, these are steel. Were a Royal Oak, they would be gold. Now you can see the rounded octagonal bezel, a holdover from the original 1972 Gerald Genta Royal Oak. In its day, it was inspired by a vintage diving helmet. For the 90s, the Offshore aspired to action above the waves, and with a screw-down crown and a 100-meter water resistance, well, provided you put it on a different strap, it could live up to that boast. Now, the dial is gold on gold on gold. You see, we've got a tachymetric scale outboard. Use it with the chronograph second sand to gauge the speed of an object, such as a speedboat over a course. You can see we've got gold applique blob indices. We have gold baton hands, gold AP applique, and a gold petite tapisserie dial. It is the small hobnail. Why is that important? Because the original Offshore used this jumbo-like small hobnail dial. Later on, it would be supplanted by the Mega, and the Mega is stamped, but the Grand and the Petite are always cut on pantograph lathes. So if you get really close, you can see the micro textures from the lathe engraving. This is artisanal, whereas the Mega is crudely stamped. It looks fine, but it's not an artisanal piece. This takes longer, and you want a more handmade Holy Trinity sports watch, not a less handmade Holy Trinity sports watch. And setting up and operating the pantograph is a tie to 19th century watchcraft, which is why I'm happy to see it here. Again, we'll do I'll try to remove my halo light from the background. We'll do a little lights out so you can get a better sense of how this watch reacts to a lack of light, and it fades very, very, very quickly. Alongside my Luminova watch, within about a minute, you can't see this. So this is true tritium. No doubts whatsoever. Okay, let's talk about the mechanism. So you might notice that the date is buried down at the bottom of a long viewing tube. Well, this is actually an aperture with a magnifier that views the base caliber of a modular movement. You can see the center lines of these pushers, they're above the crown. That's because it is a Dubois de Praz vertical clutch chronograph module made not too far from Audemars Piguet in Lelou, Switzerland. Audemars Piguet is in Les Brassus in the Vallée du Jeu. And so the base caliber, also made in the Vallée du Jeu, Jaeger-LeCoultre 889. Now, these watches were made right around a time when the Offshores transitioned from the 2126 to the 2840 movement, and the difference is not externally discernible. It's a 3 hertz versus 4 hertz rate. Right around 1997, the watch, a year after the strap-clad model came out, but it got the 2226 2840. The earlier 2126 was a 3 hertz movement, so I know this is the 2226 because I put it on my chronoscope and it read 8 beats per second. So we know this is the later high beat movement based on the JLC 889, which is very thin, fine, upscale tractor base. Now, what's important is, dating back to the 19th century, Audemars Piguet had used LeCoultre and later Jaeger-LeCoultre base calibers in its watches, and that tradition continued. When this watch was made, around about 1997, Jaeger-LeCoultre was still 40% owned by Audemars Piguet, so this was a natural relationship. So the base caliber is bidirectional automatic winding with a 40 to 42 hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate, 5 position adjustment, extensively hand adjusted, assembled, and decorated. It features both a stop second function, so you can set the watch to a known accurate reference time if you desire to do so, and it also features a quick set date, so you can rapidly cycle the date if you need to do so. Note that the date disc, which jumps instantaneously, is also gold. So you've got the automatic base, you've got the vertical clutch module on top, and then because the chronograph module is on the top and the base caliber sits below it, you're looking down past the chronograph at that date disc. That's why that looks the way it does. Add it all up, and you got 51 joules and quite a lot of parts in this movement, but it is a reliable, fine, and upscale base with a reliable, fine, and upscale module, worthy of the Audemars Piguet name. So you can see on the case back just how deep and sharp these marks are. And in particular, you could see that the hallmarks, the circular brushing, and the serial numbers are super well defined. None of these screws are boogered or maligned, and you can see how well preserved everything is, including the underside of the lugs at all 4 corners. This is a rare opportunity for someone to own a very collectible early Royal Oak. 1993 would it would have been about a D series with a 23,000 serial. I believe this is roughly 1997 because it's a D67000. And again, we have a model-specific serial. That's for this specific type of Royal Oak Offshore. Very, very low. We're in double digits. So if you want a historical document from the earliest days of Audemars Piguet's Royal Oak on a strap, certainly, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.